She walked into the Mafia King's empire searching for the truth behind a 6-year-old betrayal. But the moment Lucian Drake looked at her, he revealed something terrifying. He had been watching her for years. Now trapped between power, loyalty, and a hidden war powerful enough to destroy Chicago, Nova realizes one horrifying truth: she was never meant to survive. The underground room beneath the glass towers of Chicago had no windows, no clocks, and no mercy. 20 men sat around a black marble table, each one dressed like wealth, each one breathing like they had already accepted death as part of business. The air was silent, heavy, controlled by fear and power. No phones rang. No chairs scraped. Even the ice in the crystal glasses seemed afraid to move. At the head of the table sat Lucian Drake. He did not raise his voice. He never needed to. Lucian ruled the city with the calm of a king who knew every secret, every weakness, every betrayal before it happened. His black suit fit like armor. His silver watch caught the low light. His eyes, cold and unreadable, moved from face to face with absolute control. Men who had started wars, buried fortunes, and bought judges lowered their gaze when he looked at them. Tonight, the private mafia gathering had one purpose: loyalty. A rival family had been moving too close to Lucian's ports. Someone in this room had opened a door that should have stayed locked. No one admitted it. No one breathed too loudly. Danger pressed against every wall like a living thing. Then Nova Hayes stepped into the room. She was not supposed to be there. She wore a simple black dress beneath a rain-damp coat, her dark hair falling loose over one shoulder, her face pale but steady. She looked too young, too clean, too human for a room built on fear. Every guard turned. Every hand paused near a jacket. A whisper moved through the men like smoke. Lucian did not move. Nova walked forward until she stood at the far end of the table, directly opposite him. Her heart pounding hard enough to shake her ribs, but her breath stayed calm. She could feel every dangerous stare cutting into her skin, every silent warning telling her to run, bow, apologize, disappear. She did none of it. Lucian's underboss stepped toward her, but Lucian lifted one finger. The man stopped instantly. Nova looked straight at the most feared man in Chicago and said, "You don't control loyalty. You buy silence and call it respect." The room died. No one blinked. No one swallowed. One man's glass trembled against the table before he caught it. In Lucian Drake's empire, people had vanished for less than a sentence. Men had lost everything for using the wrong tone. But this girl, this unknown girl with rain on her coat and fire in her eyes, had just challenged him in front of every predator who feared his name. Lucian leaned back slowly. His gaze did not soften. It sharpened. Nova felt the full weight of his attention settle over her, close and suffocating. Her knees wanted to weaken, but she held her ground. She was not a victim. Not tonight. Not in this room. Not in front of men who thought power belonged only to those who could frighten others. For one long second Lucian simply studied her. Then he laughed. It was not loud. It was worse than loud. A low, smooth sound that rolled through the room and made every man go colder. The laughter did not break the tension. It tightened it. A whisper of fear spread behind clenched jaws and lowered eyes, because Lucian Drake did not laugh unless something had become dangerous enough to entertain him. Nova's breath caught, but she refused to step back. Lucian rose from his chair. The entire room rose with him. He walked around the table with unhurried grace, every step quiet, controlled, final. When he stopped in front of Nova, the space between them felt too small. She could smell cedar, smoke, and rain on him. His presence wrapped around her like a locked door. "You came into my room," he said softly, "accused my men, challenged my control, and still managed not to tremble." Nova lifted her chin. "Maybe your room needed someone who wasn't afraid." A dangerous smile touched his mouth. The men waited for punishment. Lucian lowered his voice to a whisper meant only for her. "Fearless girls are either foolish." His eyes dropped briefly to the silver pendant at her throat. "Or hiding something." Nova's heart pounding turned violent. Lucian leaned closer and finished, "And you, Nova Hayes, have been hiding from me for 6 years." Nova Hayes learned very early that the world only protected powerful people. Everyone else survived by becoming harder than their pain. At 16, she was sleeping inside the storage room of a closed laundromat in South Boston, wrapping herself in stolen blankets while snowstorms buried the streets outside. At 17, she worked double shifts at a harbor diner surrounded by drunk businessmen and men connected to the criminal underground. At 19, she learned how to read people before they spoke, how to recognize lies hidden behind expensive smiles, and how fear could become a weapon if controlled correctly. She never begged. Never depended on anyone. never trusted safety that came too easily. Because every time someone promised to protect her, they eventually wanted control over her instead. Now, standing inside Lucian Drake's underground empire, she felt those same instincts clawing awake beneath her calm expression. The room remained silent after his words. Men watched her carefully, waiting for her composure to crack after hearing her own name spoken like a loaded gun. But Nova refused to bow. Her breath stayed controlled even while her pulse hammered violently beneath her ribs. Lucian Drake stood inches away from her, tall, composed, terrifyingly still. Most women would have stepped back beneath the weight of his gaze. Most men would have apologized already. Nova simply crossed her arms slowly. "You've been watching me," she said. Lucian's mouth curved faintly. "I watch everything connected to my city." The answer sounded casual, but it tightened something cold inside her chest. Because she had spent 6 years making sure no one could trace her. She had changed apartments 4 times in 2 years. Used fake employment records. Paid cash whenever possible. She built layers around herself carefully, brick by brick, identity by identity. Survival had taught her that staying hidden mattered more than comfort. Yet Lucian Drake had found her anyway. Danger wrapped tighter around the room. One of the older men near the table shifted uneasily. Another leaned toward someone beside him, whispering under his breath. Nova noticed all of it. She noticed everything. That was why she was still alive. Lucian returned to his chair slowly, but his attention never left her. It felt invasive, sharp enough to peel through every wall she built around herself. "You came here for a reason," he said calmly. "Not courage. Not curiosity. Purpose." Nova held his stare. "Maybe I wanted to see if the King of Chicago was as untouchable as people claim." A dangerous amusement flickered across his face again. The men around him looked uncomfortable hearing her speak this way, but Nova understood something important already. Lucian respected nerve more than obedience. Weakness bored him. Fear entertained him. But resistance interested him. That made him dangerous in a completely different way. Nova walked toward the side of the table slowly, ignoring the dozens of eyes tracking her movement. Her black heels clicked softly against the marble floor. Steady. Measured. Controlled. Just like him. She stopped near the city map projected across the digital screen behind the table. Ports. Warehouses. Financial routes. Political districts. An empire hidden beneath skyscrapers and charities. Lucian Drake did not merely run organized crime. He controlled the bloodstream of the city itself. "You built all this through fear?" she asked quietly. "No," Lucian answered. "Fear keeps people obedient. Loyalty keeps them useful." The room went still again. Nova looked at the glowing map while memories surfaced unwanted inside her mind. Her mother crying over unpaid bills. Men threatening eviction. Police officers ignoring calls because poor neighborhoods did not matter. She remembered learning that laws protected wealth, not people. She became powerful because no one came to save her. She was not a victim. She was a woman sharpened by survival. But beneath her confidence lived something deeper. Something fragile she never allowed anyone close enough to touch. Fear. Not fear of Lucian. Fear of failing tonight. Because she had not walked into this underground gathering recklessly. Every word she spoke was calculated. Every risk measured carefully before she entered this building. She knew exactly how dangerous Lucian Drake was. And she came anyway. Because someone connected to him had destroyed a life years ago. And Nova intended to uncover the truth. Lucian studied her in silence before speaking again. "You hide your fear well." Nova's jaw tightened slightly. "You mistake caution for fear." "No," Lucian murmured. "I recognize fear perfectly. Mine simply learned discipline." For the first time, something human flickered between them. Not softness. Recognition. It unsettled her more than his threats would have. Lucian leaned forward slightly, folding his hands together. "Tell me something, Nova Hayes." She waited. His dark eyes locked onto hers with terrifying precision. "Does anyone else know what happened on Blackwater Pier 6 years ago?" His voice lowered to almost a whisper. "Or are you still carrying those bodies alone?" Lucian Drake did not become the King of Chicago through luck, brutality, or inherited money. Men whispered stories about him because the truth was far more terrifying than rumors. He built his empire through patience, precision, and absolute control. While other syndicates fought bloody street wars for neighborhoods and gambling routes, Lucian quietly purchased judges, shipping companies, politicians, cybersecurity firms, and international cargo ports. By the time rival families realized what he was building, half the city already belonged to him. And the other half feared him enough to obey. Nova stood motionless near the glowing digital map while Lucian remained seated at the head of the black marble table, watching her with unreadable calm. Around him sat men powerful enough to destroy corporations overnight, yet every decision in the room still revolved around him. No one interrupted him. No one questioned him. Loyalty inside Lucian Drake's world was not requested. It was expected like oxygen. Because betrayal around Lucian never received second chances. The massive screen behind her shifted automatically, revealing global shipping routes stretching from Chicago to New York, London, Singapore, and Dubai. Nova's breath slowed slightly as she realized the scale of what she was seeing. This was not merely organized crime. This was infrastructure. Money moved through his network like blood through veins. Politicians owed him favors disguised as investments. Tech companies buried information for him. Entire security agencies unknowingly protected his interests. Even charities and redevelopment programs carried his fingerprints hidden beneath layers of legal paperwork. Lucian Drake had turned power into an invisible machine. "You're surprised," he said quietly. Nova looked toward him carefully. "I expected a criminal empire." Lucian's expression barely shifted. "And instead, I found a government wearing a better suit." Several men around the table exchanged uneasy glances. One older capo looked almost offended by her tone, but Lucian's mouth curved faintly again. "You liked her honesty." That realization unsettled Nova more than the danger itself. Lucian rose slowly from his chair and walked toward the massive city display behind her. He stopped beside Nova, standing close enough for her to feel the quiet authority radiating from him. Not loud. Not aggressive. Worse. Controlled. Everything about him felt controlled. "I don't rule through chaos," Lucian murmured. "Chaos is expensive. Fear is temporary. Control lasts." Nova studied his face carefully now. She finally understood why people obeyed him so completely. Lucian Drake did not act like a criminal. He acted like a strategist who already knew the ending before anyone else entered the game. That was what made him dangerous. His eyes shifted toward one blinking district on the digital map. 3 years ago, a rival syndicate attempted to move weapons through my eastern docks without permission. They believed distance would protect them. His voice remained calm, almost conversational. By morning, every company tied to them lost funding. Every account was frozen. Their allies disappeared overnight. Nova glanced at him. "You destroyed them financially." "I erased them structurally," he corrected softly. A cold silence settled between them. Heart pounding harder now, Nova realized Lucian's greatest weapon was not violence. It was information. He studied people the way predators studied weak points. Nothing escaped him. Every movement in his empire connected back to him somehow. Which meant he probably already knew why she truly came here. That thought sent danger crawling beneath her skin. Lucian turned toward her fully now. "You prepared yourself carefully before entering this room. You memorized emergency exits. You hid a second phone inside your coat lining. You parked 6 blocks away under a fake registration." His eyes narrowed slightly. "That is not recklessness. That is survival." Nova's pulse stumbled. No one should have known those details. Yet Lucian spoke them effortlessly. "You had me followed?" she asked quietly. "No," he replied. "I noticed." The answer somehow felt worse. For the first time since entering the underground meeting, Nova experienced genuine fear. Not because Lucian threatened her. Because he saw too much. And instead of exposing her weakness to humiliate her, he seemed fascinated by it. The subtle power shift began there. The room no longer viewed her as an outsider who wandered into danger accidentally. Lucian himself had acknowledged her preparation, her intelligence, her ability to survive under pressure. The men watching them noticed it too. Their expressions changed carefully, cautiously. Nova Hayes was no longer insignificant. Lucian stepped even closer, lowering his voice enough that only she could hear him. "Most people enter my world begging for protection." His gaze locked onto hers. "You entered already planning your escape." Nova forced herself not to look away. "Maybe I don't belong in your world." A dangerous softness touched his expression for half a second. "That," Lucian said quietly, "is becoming increasingly difficult to believe." The underground room fell silent again as Lucian turned toward his men. His entire demeanor shifted instantly back into the cold authority of a king addressing his empire. "The meeting is over." Chairs moved carefully. Men stood. Guards opened doors. One by one, the room began emptying beneath the heavy tension still hanging in the air. Nova exhaled slowly, finally preparing to leave herself. Then Lucian spoke again. "Nova stays." The heavy steel doors closed behind the last remaining men, sealing Nova inside Lucian Drake's underground chamber with silence thick enough to suffocate. The digital city map still glowed across the walls, painting the room in cold shades of blue and silver. Somewhere above them, Chicago continued breathing normally, unaware that its invisible king had just decided a stranger was important enough to keep close. Nova remained standing near the marble table, refusing to show the unease tightening beneath her ribs. Her heart pounding felt louder now in the quiet. Lucian sat calmly across from her, one hand resting against the arm of his chair, his expression unreadable. "You planned this well," he said finally. Nova folded her arms tighter. "You still haven't explained why you know my name." Lucian's gaze sharpened slightly. "Because your real name was once attached to a sealed federal investigation." The words hit like ice water. Nova's breath caught instantly. For a moment, the room tilted beneath her feet. She had spent years burying every trace connected to that investigation. Records disappeared. Witnesses vanished into silence. Even mentioning Blackwater Pier had become dangerous after what happened 6 years ago. Yet Lucian spoke about it effortlessly. "You're wrong," she said quietly, though even she heard the weakness in it. "No," Lucian replied. "I'm usually very accurate." He reached toward the digital console beside him. The massive screen behind Nova flickered once before changing completely. Old surveillance photos appeared across the wall. Grainy harbor footage. Shipping manifests. Security timestamps. Then Nova saw herself. Younger. Terrified. Standing near Blackwater Pier during a storm 6 years earlier. Her stomach dropped violently. "How do you have this?" she whispered. Lucian did not answer immediately. He watched her instead, studying every fracture in her composure with frightening precision. "Because the people hunting you failed to erase everything." Danger exploded through Nova's chest. She stepped closer to the screen, staring at the old images with growing horror. There were more files than she expected. Financial reports. Names blacked out. Government seals. Shipping routes connected to Lucian's empire. And one familiar symbol she never wanted to see again. A silver wolf. Nova's blood turned cold. "That's impossible," she breathed. Lucian stood slowly now. "Not impossible. Hidden." The room suddenly felt too small. The silver wolf insignia belonged to a covert financial network responsible for laundering international money through humanitarian ports years ago. Nova accidentally discovered it while working under a fake accounting contract during college. She thought exposing the corruption would protect innocent people. Instead, people disappeared. Witnesses changed statements overnight. Officials denied records existed. Someone burned entire storage archives before investigations could begin. Nova barely escaped with her life after realizing powerful men were involved. But seeing the symbol here meant something far worse. The network had never collapsed. It evolved. "You walked into my meeting believing you were investigating me," Lucian said calmly. "But you never understood who truly survived Blackwater Pier." Nova looked toward him sharply. "You knew about the operation?" Lucian's eyes darkened slightly. "I inherited the consequences of it." A dangerous silence followed. Then another voice suddenly spoke from near the entrance. She was never supposed to survive long enough to ask questions. Nova spun instantly. A tall man stepped from the shadows beside the steel doors. Expensive suit. Calm posture. Silver tie clip shaped like a wolf. Lucian's underboss. Adrian Vale. Nova felt fear crawl violently up her spine. Because Adrian had been standing beside Lucian during the earlier meeting. Calm. Loyal. Trusted. Yet now every instinct inside her screamed betrayal. Lucian's expression changed almost invisibly, but the temperature in the room dropped instantly. "Careful, Adrian," he said softly. Adrian ignored the warning, his eyes fixed entirely on Nova now. "You should have stayed hidden, Miss Hayes. Curiosity has a way of destroying survivors." Nova's pulse thundered painfully. This was bigger than she imagined. Lucian stepped forward slightly, positioning himself between Adrian and Nova without even appearing to think about it. The movement was subtle but absolute. Protective. Controlling. What? Nova noticed it immediately. "So it was you," she whispered toward Adrian. "You were connected to Blackwater." Adrian smiled faintly. "Connected? No. I managed portions of it." Heart pounding violently now, Nova realized the truth piece by piece. Someone inside Lucian's inner circle had been protecting the very network responsible for destroying lives years ago. And Lucian himself might not have known. Danger pressed against every wall. Adrian looked almost amused by her fear. Lucian built an empire through loyalty. Unfortunately, loyalty becomes fragile when billions disappear. Lucian's voice turned dangerously quiet. You've already said too much. For the first time since entering the underground chamber, Nova saw genuine fury beneath Lucian Drake's controlled exterior. Not explosive rage. Worse, cold disappointment. The kind that destroyed people silently. Adrian straightened his cuffs calmly. I warned them you would eventually notice her. Nova froze. Plural. Her breath became uneven. Lucian slowly turned toward her again, his expression unreadable once more. Now you understand why leaving was never an option. Nova stared at him, confusion and fear colliding together. Then Lucian delivered the final revelation quietly. I've been watching you since the night you escaped Blackwater Pier 6 years ago. Nova did not leave Lucian Drake's underground compound that night. Not because the doors were locked. Not because guards blocked the exits. The truth was more dangerous than captivity. The moment Lucian revealed he had been watching her for 6 years, the entire shape of reality shifted beneath her feet. Every safe apartment she rented, every new identity she created, every careful escape route she built suddenly felt fragile. If Lucian could find her that easily, then so could the people connected to Adrian Vale and the hidden network behind Blackwater Pier. And for the first time in years, Nova understood something terrifying. Running was no longer enough. The penthouse above Lucian's private tower overlooked the frozen Chicago skyline like a kingdom floating above the city. Floor-to-ceiling windows reflected silver lights across black marble floors, soft amber lamps and impossible silence. There were no loud guards outside the doors. No visible weapons. Everything about Lucian's world carried the same quiet confidence he did. Power never needed to announce itself here. Nova stood near the windows, arms folded tightly while snow drifted outside. Her breath fogged faintly against the cold glass. She should have felt trapped. Instead, something worse settled beneath her ribs. Safe. The realization disturbed her instantly. Lucian stepped into the penthouse behind her after dismissing the security detail with a single glance. His tie was gone now, the top buttons of his black shirt loosened slightly, but the dangerous calm around him remained untouched. You think I'm your prisoner, Nova said quietly without turning. No, Lucian replied. Prisoners try to leave. She looked at him carefully then. And what am I? His gaze lingered on her for a moment too long. Undecided. Heart pounding softly now, Nova looked away first. That should not have affected her. Nothing about Lucian Drake should have felt steady or comforting. He was the king of an underground empire built on control and fear. Men disappeared because of him. Cities bent around his decisions. Yet somehow standing beside him felt safer than standing alone. It made no sense. Lucian crossed the room slowly before placing a small encrypted phone onto the marble counter beside her. Only 3 people have this number, he said calmly. If anything feels wrong, you call me immediately. Nova frowned slightly. You expect me to trust you? I expect you to survive. The answer landed heavier than she expected. Lucian did not offer false comfort. He did not pretend innocence. There was no performance in him. Every word felt calculated, honest in the coldest possible way. That honesty made him more dangerous than charming lies ever could. Nova looked toward the city lights below. You still haven't explained why you protected me all these years. Lucian moved beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. At first, you were simply connected to unfinished business. His voice lowered slightly. Then I realized something unusual. Nova glanced at him carefully. You adapted faster than trained operatives, he continued. You survived fear without letting it define you. Most people break after discovering how ugly powerful men truly are. His eyes locked onto hers. You became stronger. Something shifted silently between them. Lucian respected strength. Not perfection. Not obedience. Strength. And Nova realized he was beginning to see her differently now. Not as collateral damage. Not as a witness. Something else. What? The word remained unspoken, but she felt it hidden beneath the way he watched her, the way security quietly followed her movements now, the way every dangerous conversation suddenly stopped when she entered a room. Lucian Drake was claiming space around her without asking permission. Oddly, Nova did not entirely hate it. Days passed inside the tower with strange tension settling between them. Lucian included her in meetings unexpectedly. He listened when she questioned financial patterns connected to Blackwater Pier. He watched her analyze coded records faster than some of his own analysts. Slowly, the room full of dangerous men stopped treating her like an outsider. Because Lucian himself no longer treated her that way. One evening, Nova found him alone in the private library overlooking the river. The city lights painted shadows across his sharp features as he reviewed files in complete silence. "You never sleep?" she asked softly. Lucian looked up briefly. "Kings don't sleep well." Nova almost smiled. He noticed. That tiny reaction changed the atmosphere instantly. For one dangerous second, Lucian looked less like a ruler and more like a man carrying exhaustion too heavy to speak aloud. The vulnerability disappeared quickly, but Nova saw it. And he knew she saw it. "Why are you really helping me?" she asked quietly. Lucian closed the file in front of him slowly. "Because Adrian isn't the only betrayal inside my empire." Fear tightened inside her chest again. "How deep does this go?" Lucian's expression darkened slightly. "Deep enough that keeping you close is safer than letting you disappear." Silence settled between them. Nova stared at him carefully before finally saying the truth she had hidden since entering his world. "I didn't come to your meeting by accident, Lucian." Her breath slowed deliberately. "I came because someone told me you were the only man powerful enough to destroy the people behind Blackwater Pier." The storm over Chicago arrived after midnight. Rain slammed against the glass walls of Lucian Drake's penthouse while the city below disappeared beneath silver fog and flashing lights. Inside the private strategy room at the center of the tower, the atmosphere felt colder than the storm itself. Digital files glowed across multiple screens, financial records unfolding piece by piece like buried landmines waiting to explode. Nova stood beside the long obsidian table, staring at the evidence she had spent 6 years protecting. And now, finally revealing. Lucian remained silent across from her, one hand resting against the edge of the table, his dark eyes fixed on the encrypted documents projected across the screens. Every few seconds another hidden account surfaced. Another politician connected to offshore routes. Another shell company tied directly to Blackwater Pier. The deeper the files opened, the more dangerous the truth became. "This is not just corruption," Nova said quietly, her breath controlled despite the tension wrapping around the room. Blackwater was designed to create invisible control over international trade routes. Humanitarian shipments, medical imports, military technology, election financing. She looked toward Lucian carefully. "Someone inside your empire rebuilt the network after the investigation collapsed." Lucian's jaw tightened slightly. That tiny movement alone revealed enough. For the first time since Nova met him, the King of Chicago looked genuinely unsettled. Because this was no longer about hidden enemies outside his empire. This was betrayal from within. Nova stepped closer to the screen displaying dozens of connected names. 6 years ago, I found accounting inconsistencies while auditing cargo transfers under a federal subcontractor. At first I thought it was tax fraud. Then I realized entire shipments were disappearing from government records. Her voice lowered slightly. People protecting the operation controlled ports, politicians, and intelligence contractors. Lucian studied her carefully. "And you copied the files before they erased everything?" Nova nodded once. Heart pounding heavily now, she reached into her coat pocket and removed a small encrypted drive no larger than a coin. The room seemed to tighten instantly around it. "This contains the full ledger," she said softly. "Every hidden account. Every coded transaction. Every executive and political name connected to Blackwater." Silence crashed down. Lucian stared at the drive with dangerous stillness. Because in Nova's hand rested enough information to collapse governments, destroy alliances, and ignite war between syndicates powerful enough to destabilize entire cities. Power shifted invisibly again. Nova was no longer merely connected to the Empire's danger. She had become central to its survival. "You kept this hidden for 6 years?" Lucian asked quietly. "I stayed alive for 6 years because I kept it hidden." Lucian walked toward her slowly then, his presence filling the room with cold gravity. Close enough now that Nova could feel the tension radiating beneath his calm exterior. "You understand what happens if this leaks publicly," he murmured. "Yes. Markets collapse. Political alliances fracture. Every enemy connected to Blackwater turns desperate." Nova met his gaze steadily despite the danger vibrating between them. "That's why I came to you." Lucian looked at her for a long moment, studying every layer beneath her composure. Fear existed inside her. He could see it clearly now. But fear never controlled her decisions. That was why he respected her. She was not a victim hiding from powerful men anymore. She became powerful enough to threaten them back. The realization changed something inside him. "You trusted me with this?" Lucian said quietly. Nova's expression hardened slightly. "No. I trusted your need for control more than everyone else's greed." A dangerous almost smile touched his face briefly, then vanished. Because another truth sat heavily between them now. Loyalty. Lucian built his empire on it. Demanded it absolutely. Yet the evidence on those screens proved someone inside his closest circle had betrayed him for years while standing beside him daily. And Nova's information could either save his empire, or burn it to the ground. The room fell silent again as Lucian activated another encrypted file from the drive. A series of hidden communications appeared instantly across the central screen. Timestamps. Transaction approvals. Internal authorizations. Then one specific access signature flashed onto the monitor. Lucian froze. Nova noticed immediately. What is it? He did not answer right away. Instead, Lucian stared at the screen with terrifying stillness, every emotion disappearing behind cold calculation. The rain outside intensified, thunder rolling through the skyline while the atmosphere inside the room became suffocating. Nova stepped closer carefully. Then she saw the authorization code herself. A private internal signature tied directly to Lucian's highest security clearance system. Only 3 people inside the Empire possessed access at that level. Lucian, his deceased mentor, and Elias Moretti. Nova's stomach dropped. Elias Moretti was not merely part of Lucian's organization. He was family in every way that mattered. Trusted advisor. Closest ally. The man who helped Lucian build the Empire from nothing after the old Syndicate Wars. The one man Lucian never questioned. A whisper escaped Nova's lips. No. Lucian's expression darkened into something far more dangerous than anger. Betrayed. He reached slowly toward the screen, opening the final encrypted transaction attached to Elias's authorization code. The payment destination loaded instantly. Directly connected to Adrian Vale. Heart pounding violently now, Nova looked toward Lucian just as he finally spoke in a voice cold enough to stop breathing itself. The traitor, his eyes lifted slowly from the screen, was beside me the entire time. War did not explode across Chicago with gunfire or sirens. It arrived quietly. Bank accounts froze without warning. Trusted executives vanished from meetings. Cargo shipments rerouted overnight. Politicians stopped answering private calls connected to Lucian Drake's empire. Across the city, invisible pressure tightened around every business tied to Blackwater Pier. Someone inside the network realized the truth had surfaced. And now they were moving first. The private strategy floor inside Lucian's tower transformed into the center of a silent war. Massive digital screens tracked financial disruptions across international markets while encrypted calls flowed through secured lines non-stop. Men who once walked through Lucian's empire with perfect confidence now whispered behind closed doors, terrified of choosing the wrong side. Because loyalty inside an empire became fragile the moment betrayal exposed itself. Nova stood near the central operations table wearing one of Lucian's dark tailored jackets thrown over her black clothes, her hair pulled back, eyes sharp with focus. 3 days ago, those men would never have allowed her inside strategic meetings. Now every decision in the room quietly revolved around her information. She became powerful without asking permission. Lucian watched her carefully from across the room. Not because he doubted her. Because he realized everyone else had underestimated her first. Nova moved between glowing financial projections with calm precision, tracing hidden transaction routes faster than Lucian's analysts could process them. The offshore transfers are distractions, she said firmly, pointing toward a series of encrypted accounts. They want us watching the money while they reposition influence inside the ports. One of Lucian's senior advisors frowned. How would you know that? Nova looked directly at him. Because that's exactly how Blackwater survived 6 years ago. Silence followed instantly. Lucian stepped beside her slowly. Close. Steady. His presence settled around her like controlled gravity while the rest of the room watched carefully. Follow her lead, he ordered calmly. The advisor fell silent immediately. That single sentence changed everything. Lucian Drake, the king of Chicago, had just chosen Nova Hayes over men who served his empire for years. Some looked shocked. Others looked nervous. But none dared challenge him openly. Because Lucian had already made his decision. Blind loyalty meant nothing if corruption poisoned the empire from inside. Nova felt the shift deeply. For the first time in years, someone powerful was not trying to silence her truth. Lucian listened to it, protected it, strengthened it, and somewhere inside the chaos growing around them, trust quietly formed. The storm outside intensified while tension inside the tower reached unbearable levels. Every hour revealed new fractures inside Lucian's organization. Hidden alliances surfaced. Executives disappeared from encrypted communication grids. Entire shipping divisions began turning against each other under financial pressure. War had begun. But Nova no longer stood outside it. She stood beside the king himself. Late that night, Lucian found her alone near the massive windows overlooking Chicago. The city lights reflected softly against the glass while exhaustion pulled at both of them silently. "You should sleep," Lucian said quietly. Nova exhaled slowly. "People are collapsing your empire in real time. And you've been awake for 36 hours. She almost smiled faintly at that. Lucian stepped beside her, his shoulder nearly brushing hers now. Most people would have run from this level of danger. Nova stared at the skyline. Most people didn't spend 6 years surviving it already. Something dangerous and emotional passed between them then. Not softness. Recognition. Lucian understood survival. So did she. Two people shaped by power, isolation, and betrayal standing close enough now to become something stronger together. King and queen. Neither spoke the words aloud. But everyone inside the tower already felt the shift happening. Nova turned toward him carefully. "Why did you really choose me over your own people?" Lucian's expression darkened slightly. "Because everyone else demanded trust while hiding secrets." His eyes locked onto hers. "You handed me the truth even when it endangered you." Heart pounding unevenly now, Nova looked away first. That small vulnerability in herself frightened her more than the war outside. Because Lucian Drake was becoming dangerous in a completely different way now. Personal. Suddenly alarms flashed red across the strategy floor behind them. Both turned instantly. One of Lucian's analysts rushed forward pale-faced, holding a decrypted file. "Boss, you need to see this." The room went silent again. Lucian took the tablet slowly while Nova stepped closer beside him. A classified communication thread appeared on screen. Time stamps. Blackwater authorization codes. Surveillance updates. Then Nova saw her own name repeated again and again. Her stomach dropped violently. The messages dated back nearly 7 years. Before Blackwater Pier. Before the investigation. Before she even knew the network existed. Lucian's expression hardened dangerously as he continued reading. "What is it?" Nova whispered. He lifted his eyes toward her slowly. The room felt suffocating now. Then Lucian spoke the words that shattered everything again. "According to these files," his voice lowered into a deadly calm whisper, "someone planned for you to enter my empire long before either of us ever met." By sunrise, the war inside Lucian Drake's empire was already ending. Not because the enemy surrendered. Because Lucian stopped playing defense. The private command floor overlooking Chicago moved with terrifying precision as encrypted orders traveled through the empire faster than panic itself. Every hidden account tied to Elias Moretti and Adrian Vale vanished from active networks within hours. Port access codes changed. Political protections collapsed. Entire financial chains connected to Blackwater Pier disappeared beneath Lucian's direct control before rival syndicates could react. The king had finally chosen his side. And beside him stood the woman everyone underestimated. Nova Hayes. 3 days ago, powerful men viewed her as collateral damage from an old conspiracy. Now they watched her move through Lucian's tower with quiet authority that changed the atmosphere around her completely. Analysts waited for her instructions. Security teams adjusted routes based on her risk assessments. Even Lucian's oldest advisors lowered their voices when she entered strategy meetings. She was not a victim. She became powerful enough to reshape an empire. Nova stood near the center of the operations floor wearing black tailored slacks and a dark silk blouse Lucian had arranged for her without asking. The giant digital screens around the room reflected across her sharp expression while she coordinated final containment strategies tied to Blackwater's hidden network. "Redirect the Singapore transfers through the northern channels," she instructed calmly. "If Vale's remaining people lose access to offshore communication, they lose leverage." One of Lucian's executives hesitated briefly. "And if they retaliate publicly?" Nova looked directly at him. "Then we release enough financial evidence to turn every government tied to Blackwater against them." Her voice remained perfectly steady. "Power survives through perception. Destroy the perception and the structure collapses." The room fell silent. Lucian watched her from across the table with something dangerously close to pride hidden beneath his calm expression. Because Nova no longer looked like someone surviving his world. She looked born for it. Later that evening, the final confrontation unfolded quietly inside the private council chamber beneath Lucian's tower. Elias Moretti sat at the opposite end of the long black table, older now than the man Lucian once trusted blindly, but still composed beneath the weight of exposure. Rain tapped softly against the underground skylights while tension suffocated the room. No weapons rested on the table. They did not need them. Truth was already lethal enough. "You built this empire with me," Lucian said quietly. "Why betray it?" Elias exhaled slowly, exhaustion finally breaking through his controlled mask. "Because loyalty doesn't survive forever, Lucian. Power changes men." His eyes shifted briefly toward Nova. "And she was always meant to become part of this." Nova's heart pounding intensified slightly. "Explain," Lucian ordered coldly. Elias leaned back in his chair. Nova's father worked inside Blackwater before the network collapsed. He discovered too much and tried exposing the operation internally. His gaze lowered briefly. "They eliminated him before he could succeed." Nova froze. The room tilted around her. Every breath suddenly felt too sharp. "My father," she whispered. "He protected you without realizing it," Elias continued quietly. "Before his death, he transferred fragments of Blackwater's ledger into encrypted financial systems connected to your identity. You carried the final access key your entire life without knowing it." Nova stared at him in stunned silence. Everything changed again. Her survival had never been random. Her connection to Lucian's empire had existed long before Blackwater Pier. Lucian slowly turned toward her then, his expression unreadable but softer somehow beneath the cold control he carried everywhere else. "She was part of the system from the beginning," Elias murmured. "The perfect insurance policy." Nova looked down briefly, struggling against the storm of emotions crashing through her chest. Fear, anger, grief. But beneath all of it, something stronger remained standing. Strength. Lucian moved beside her slowly, standing close enough that his presence grounded the chaos threatening to consume her. His voice lowered into a calm whisper meant only for her. "You are not what they made you." Nova's breath shook once, then steadied. Because for the first time in her life, someone powerful was not trying to control her identity. He was protecting it. Lucian turned back toward Elias finally, the atmosphere around him becoming terrifyingly calm once again. "You taught me how to build an empire," he said quietly. "But you forgot something important." Elias looked at him carefully. Lucian's hand settled lightly against Nova's back as his gaze hardened into absolute certainty. "A king who stands alone eventually falls." His voice lowered dangerously. "But a queen beside him changes everything." Silence crushed the room. The betrayal ended there. By midnight, Elias Moretti disappeared permanently from every part of the empire he once controlled. No public scandal followed. No visible collapse. Lucian ensured the transition happened cleanly, surgically, quietly. And beside him, Nova Hayes rose with equal authority. The queen he never expected. Days later, the city already whispered new stories about them. About the woman standing beside Chicago's king during high-level meetings. About the mysterious strategist powerful enough to survive Lucian Drake's world and reshape it beside him. But late one night, while Nova stood alone inside the penthouse overlooking the city, a secure private message appeared silently on her encrypted phone. One sentence. The queen was always the true target. Then another message arrived immediately after. And this time, it included a recent photo of Nova entering Lucian's tower. If this story kept your heart pounding until the very end, then you already know Nova Hayes was never just another girl in danger. She became powerful enough to stand beside a king. Stories like this only get darker, deeper, and more dangerous from here, so don't forget to like, subscribe, and share if you want more cinematic mafia romance stories that feel impossible to stop watching. But before you leave, answer one thing in the comments. Did Lucian truly protect Nova because he loved her, or because the queen was always the real key to controlling the empire?